Good morning, everyone. Well, good afternoon. Good to see you all. Hopefully, you'll stay with us for the whole of our community outcomes meeting. And our theme is supporting victims and witnesses is the first item. But also, just to say, this is our opportunity as the Mayor and Deputy Mayor to hold West Yorkshire Police to account. And hopefully, you'll acknowledge that having this live streamed is also helpful for you to see us doing our job. But also, the questions that we're asking come from you and from conversations we have as well. So thank you for your contributions. So firstly, welcome, introductions and apologies. So we have apologies from the Chief Constable, John Robbins, and Robert Forrest, Head of Policing and Crime. So can we firstly go around the room and just make introductions, because we don't necessarily all know each other from the public's point of view. So Tracy Braden, the Mayor.
Alison Lowe, Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime.
Sarah Jones, Temporary ACC, West Yorkshire Police, responsible for specialist crime and criminal justice.
ACC, Demi Miller, Local Policing and Safeguarding.
Catherine Hankinson, Deputy Chief Constable.
Sarah Fraser, Superintendent, Corporate Services Governance.
Inspector Lennon, Visual Liaison,
Inspector Mark Phillips, Staffs, DCC.
Wendy Stevens, Research and Performance Manager, and Garrett Sparks, and Policing and Crime.
Thank you so much. That's support from West Yorkshire Police, but also our team at the Combined Authority. Okie doke, so let's move on to item 2, notes of the previous meeting, April the 29th, 2025, matters arising. Any comments on the minutes? No?
No.
Thank you so much. Okay, so item 3 is mine and the Chief Constable's announcements, and of course Catherine Hankinson is stepping in for the Chief Constable. So my first priority for this meeting is just to let the public know that we had our first co-production event to tackle serious violence on Wednesday the 23rd of July. It's the first of a series of co-production events which will fulfil my pledge to launch a new strategy to tackle serious violence. It'll be co-produced with communities, including those with lived and learned experience. It was really well supported, and I'd really personally like to thank the family of Alfie Lewis. You'll remember Alfie was fatally stabbed in November 2023 and his aunt Michelle Lewis shared his story and more about how she's working with Red Bubble Arts in a trauma-informed way to engage students in schools and colleges in a bid to stop them carrying knives. As part of the co-production, we're inviting all communities to take part in our consultation through coming to our in-person events, speaking to our team, or by completing an online consultation. We also have a survey designed for parents or workers to complete with children, because this is obviously not a crime that only concerns adults, it concerns children as well. All of the details can be found on our website. And Alfie's story is an absolutely heartbreaking reminder of what is at stake, and the voice of his family is such a powerful force in helping us to drive real and lasting change, because none of us can do this on our own. We need the help of the public and all of our partners to tackle serious violence. Secondly, Alison and I were at Leeds Pride 2023 in the pouring rain. We were delighted to join the celebrations, walking alongside our colleagues at the Combined Authority, and we did have a wonderful time celebrating LGBTQ+ life here in West Yorkshire and being part of a really vibrant parade. Alison, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, just to say that there were no arrests, which is a brilliant achievement, I think, because there were so many thousands of people there. West Yorkshire Police policed the event proportionately. They were very visible on the day, and I had good feedback from the public about the way that the event was policed, which was really good to hear.
Thank you. There was still a lot of joy in the rain, wasn't there?
Yes.
We didn't care.
A bit of singing.
Okay, moving on. We've got a brilliant event coming up for the summer, Vision Zero annual event. It was such a great success in Bradford last year. So we're going to be delivering an equally impactful and engagement event this year, this time in the heart of Leeds. It's going to be free, of course, and family friendly, all about road safety in Millennium Square, Thursday the 14th of August from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. So please come with your family, with your friends. There's going to be interactive stalls for children and adults and opportunities to speak with engagement teams about road safety and the local transport plan. So please do come down, and Alison will be there on the day. Moving on to the Mayor's Safer Communities Grant Round 8 update. Thank you everybody who's applied to the Grant Round 8 for the Safer Communities Fund. We've received an amazing 217 applications requesting over £3 million. Now our independent advisory board are currently reviewing applications. I'm so disappointed I don't make the choice. Other people do, and we will be contacting all applicants the week beginning the 22nd of September. So good luck to everybody that's applied. Also, our Deputy Chief Constable, Catherine Hankinson, who's stepping in for the Chief Constable today, it's her retirement, and this is her last com, and I want to just pass on my huge appreciation to Catherine, who joined West Yorkshire Police May 2017. Thank you for your support across local policing, safeguarding, and in support of the victim's journey. As Deputy Chief Constable since November 2022, I know you've had a massive impact, both here in West Yorkshire and nationally, at the National Police Chiefs Council, leading on missing people, where you've helped transform this area of policing. I also really want to celebrate and recognise your achievement as one of the most senior females in British policing. I know your service will inspire others to follow your lead. And I also know you love to play netball and travelling with your family, and you'll continue to inspire all those who you continue to support, mentor and work with. So thank you so much, Catherine, for your service for the people of West Yorkshire. And I wish you all the very best in retirement, as the Lionesses have also shown. If you can't see it, you can't be it. So thank you for your service, and I'm sure there are many young officers who have looked up to you and see a great future here in West Yorkshire Police because of your influence. So thank you, and I wish you all the best with your retirement. So moving on to urgent items, we have just one urgent item. I just wanted to raise it because we've been met with and contacted by groups and individuals about the impact on the Supreme Court ruling on the definition of a woman in the Equality Act 2010, with concerns being raised to me by people identifying as trans about their feelings of safety. I want to ask what the current position is in relation to trans-based hate crime, and understand any policing impact following the ruling. And can I also add what reassurance West Yorkshire Police can offer to make people feel safe in West Yorkshire? Thank you.
Yeah. Am I taking this one? Yeah.
Thank you, Catherine, if you would.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So I think we've reported previously, I'm not sure whether it was a COM or maybe it's a police and crime panel, that we were reviewing both our internal and external policies in terms of the ruling that had been made by the Supreme Court. And I'm pleased to say that whilst some of those are still being refreshed and reviewed, we are confident that the policies that we have in place, both internally and externally facing, are compliant with that ruling. And so no big changes really for us in West Yorkshire in terms of any internal focus or indeed external focus. So what I would say to people in the trans community, or anybody really in communities experiencing hate crime, is that we absolutely, take that zero tolerance approach in West Yorkshire, that you must continue to report hate crime to us. It will be taken seriously, and alongside our neighbourhood policing colleagues, we will ensure that a full and proportionate investigation is undertaken. So no real changes, because we were already sort of operating in a compliant way, both internally and externally, in terms of that ruling.
Thank you. And I would say to members of the public, even if it's something small, to report it is really important, because it's through the clustering of reports that resources gets applied in a robust way. So please do keep reporting if you're witnessing or experiencing hate crime in any way.
Yeah.
Anything to add, Alison?
No, yeah, just to say that we know that the communities of West Yorkshire are concerned about the judgment on, there's a range of views, and we want to just reassure the public that we are here for everybody, and we want everyone to feel safe, and if they've got any concerns, that they should be raising those directly with the police.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for that. So moving on to item 5, safeguarding. I know that ACC Damien Miller is responding, so thank you. So from the report, the report describes West Yorkshire Police's use of analytic tools to help predict the risk of a domestic abuse victim experiencing further serious harm. This is very innovative and really exciting opportunity for us to get better outcomes. Are there any early findings from the Leeds-based pilot which compare the tool's assessment of risk against the usual domestic abuse, stalking and harassment assessments? And if we can avoid using initials for the public, that's always helpful, isn't it? It's called DASH in the police, but I think if we can just speak to that innovation, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, so the domestic abuse analytical tool, the pilot that we're going to run in Leeds, should be commencing in September. There's just been a slight delay in delivering that, because before we go live with any system, what we've tried to do is test it in the live environment, but behind the scenes, just to make sure everything's working perfectly. There's just been a slight issue with the algorithm, so we're just working through that at this moment in time before switching it on fully in September. So I'm more than happy to come back to the next COM and provide you an update then, if that's okay, mate.
Would you mind just giving us a headline of how this is different, just for the public, how this is getting better results?
Yeah, so we're not suggesting yet it's going to get better results.
We've
got to testing, we're hoping, so we're fingers crossed, touching wood. So at the moment we use DASH, which is a domestic abuse and stalking and harassment question set at domestic incidents. And when we go through that, when the officer goes through that at the scene, that's to assess risk, but it's a questionnaire. What we have done is look at historical data using an algorithm to assess risk. So what we've been able to do by using previous instance is look at what then ended up to be the outcome. So if we've assessed them as a standard grade risk, was that standard? Those that were medium, and what we've been able to see from that data is by using the old-fashioned DASH, it's not a great indicator at risk. So what we're hoping for is by using the previous data, that will help the officer assess the risk. So the algorithm won't make the decision, it will be a guidance to the officer, and then the officer, who will still complete DASH at the time, will go through that, and he or she will then make the decision on that risk, and then that will be how we then deal with that victim and that offender from that point on.
I mean, anything that stops, that lowers the numbers of women being harmed or murdered, it's got to be a good thing.
Completely
so it's a great use of, it's AI tool, so it's a great use if it works. Let's hope it does. And it's quite positive. People feel optimistic about that.
We are optimistic, because when we've run data, because when we've run lifetime data against it, it's excess risk that we haven't identified through the old-fashioned risk assessment.
Right.
So on paper and in the test environment, it does appear to work. But what we then need to do is obviously test it as a pilot within one district, and obviously we've picked the busiest one of Leeds, and then at the same time we'll still run DASH as it is across the other 4 districts, and then we'll assess after 3 months, and if it does show that we're identifying risk more consistently, then we will roll it out across the force.
Thank you. That's we'll watch this space, and hopefully it'll be good news. Okie doke. Page 9 of the report talks about cases of domestic servitude, highlights how hard they are to identify and successfully prosecute. I know that you've been working with the Crown Prosecution Service to help conviction rates. Can you speak to this, please, for us?
Yeah, so what we've always found is, certainly in these cases, it's very hard to prosecute because you've got a single voice in a domestic setting, and our success rate at achieving those successful outcomes are brilliant, and what we're trying to do is increase those. So through the Crown Prosecution Service meetings that we have jointly, we place that on the agenda item to discuss jointly how do we improve not only the investigation, but how do we work with the Crown Prosecution Service to secure those convictions as well. So what we've been able to do through that is put together a case which we have now referred to the CPS, that has been allocated to one of their lawyers who works in this area to improve the chances of achieving a successful prosecution. What we've also been able to do as well with the work that we've been doing with CPS is linking with Thames Valley. So Thames Valley have just recently had a very successful case where the perpetrator received 17 years, which is a substantial sentence. And what we've done with that is learn not only from the police investigation, but also how their local Crown Prosecution Service dealt with it, because at the time that was being put through as individual offences such as rape, assault, coercive behaviour. But it was actually the CPS lawyer who identified it in this occasion and then prosecuted it and successfully prosecuted it. So what we are doing is getting all their best practice and bringing that into force as well, just to see how we can jointly learn, not only the police but CPS as well, to take all that best practice and learning from Thames Valley as well. So what we're also doing is the work's being done with regards to victim voices as well. So there's a documentary regarding domestic servitude, and again that's based on the victim from Thames Valley as well. So we're hoping to share that as well, just to increase reporting as well, and any learning that we can get from that victim as well, that we can bring into West Yorkshire. And as I say, not only with regards to our investigation, but the prosecution. So we're working hand in hand with CPS to improve those conviction rates.
And the public are also our eyes and ears, aren't they?
Definitely.
So they can be very helpful if they witness something that looks unusual. Thank you. That sounds really interesting. And another good news story regarding mental health crisis. You mentioned the adoption of the Webley handover process in Wakefield. Can you give us more detail on what the programme aims to achieve?
Yeah, so this is part of the wider Right Care, Right Person,
Yeah.
And it's a national piece of work that's been looked at. So on occasions, we will come across people within the community that we will not arrest under Section 136 of the Mental Health Act, but it's quite clear that they need to attend A&E, and they will voluntarily attend and allow us to take them to A&E. In the past, what that's ended up meaning is that we would then have to remain within that environment at the A&E with that individual until they've been assessed, and at which point we would then be able to walk away. What the Webley handover allows us to do is not only look at what's on our recorded systems and on our partner systems, but then provide that information to the hospital staff. And as we attend with that individual, we will hand the individual over with the Webley handover document, and they then accept the risk in that individual, which means at which point we can obviously walk away and then attend further calls, because at any point that individual could walk out of the hospital, and until the Webley handover comes into place, that's why we would have to remain with that individual. That hands the risk over to the A&E staff, and we will then be able to walk away from that point and deal with other members of the public across the communities with regards to their calls and concerns.
And this is going to increase productivity, isn't it? Because whilst you might have a short period handing over to a charitable organisation, for example, when you go to A&E, you have to stay with that person. Yeah. So that has been a real use of police time, hasn't it?
It is, and like I say, that wider Right Care, Right Person, which obviously we started at a very early stage with the absconder policy from hospital, is helpful because it frees up our officers and staff's time.
Great stuff. Okie doke, thank you. And finally, you mentioned in the paper that officers who deliver a person in crisis to a mental health crisis suite can expect the handover process to take less than an hour, but for other health-based places of safety, the process may take many hours. And this is what we've been discussing, isn't it? And thinking of the demand of officers' time, what proportion of the incidents officers respond to are taking the quicker crisis suite pathway?
So 71% of those that we detain in section 136 will go straight to a 136 suite. So for example in Leeds we'll take them to the Beckling Centre. And again, with regards to that piece of work, we now monitor the handover times, and in the majority of occasions across West Yorkshire, the majority of establishments are meeting that hour handover time, so we will stay there for a maximum of an hour. What that obviously leaves is 29% of individuals that we may have to take to an A&E. That could be for one of two reasons. One, we detain them to section 136, but they've got an injury, so rightly so that they need to go to A&E to have that injury assessed in the first place, hence why we would go there. But on some occasions within certain local authorities, if they don't have the space, the bed space, or the availability, our only step then is to take them to A&E. So it's still a high proportion, but it's getting better because we monitor that now on a monthly basis, and certainly for a future Safeguarding Adults paper, I'm more than happy to bring that updated percentage and also the handover times that we've got within each of those section 136 suites across West Yorkshire, because we have all that information.
That would be good to have that data, thank you. So that's the end of the questions on adult safeguarding. So you are now released.
Thank you very much.
But can I just thank you personally for the work that you do on adult safeguarding. It's a difficult, relentless job, and I know that the public of West Yorkshire will be grateful that you pay so much attention. So thank you for your diligence.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Cheers. Okie doke, moving on to drugs and alcohol misuse. I think Sarah Jones, you'll be responding. Thank you. So, first question: the Home Office have recently announced West Yorkshire will receive over £1 million of funding to help tackle county lines drug dealing. It's 10 years since the National Crime Agency first highlighted the threat posed by county lines drug dealing. Can you tell us how this type of offending has evolved over time here in West Yorkshire, and how will the new funding help to disrupt drug gangs and protect vulnerable people who may be exploited by them? Adding to this, to say that the mayors of York and North Yorkshire and South Yorkshire have come together in the White Rose Agreement to see how we can help regarding county lines cross borders. So whilst Oliver and I are police and crime commissioners, there must be a way that we can be helpful cross border as well. So over to you.
Yeah, absolutely, Mary. I think you probably touched on it there. Obviously, as with other large forces with big city populations, we do unfortunately export county lines drug dealers into other smaller rural areas. So North Yorkshire have been unfortunately received with some of our county lines drug dealers, and we've wanted to tackle that and have been tackling it successfully for quite a while, but we knew other large force areas, Merseyside being one of them, Manchester being another, had received some substantial funding from the National in order to be able to deal with that. And we wanted to get onto the same footing that they've been on, which is to develop a small team. So, as you'll know, Mayor, County Lines has a significant impact, not just on drug dealing, but it's the area of drug dealing that exploits vulnerable children. We've recovered children from as far away as Southampton and Scotland who we believe have been exploited by County Lines. It's often responsible for the cookering of vulnerable adults, taking over their premises, utilising those premises because those people are vulnerable to that sort of exploitation. And actually, it's the sort of drug dealing that we know has the biggest impact in the locality, generating antisocial behaviour. So it's not the higher level drug dealing, but it's where our communities are most impacted, is via that. It has changed recently, as with everything. It's moved on to online modelling in terms of growing their business and dealing with the exploitation of young people in the online space. But what this team is going to be doing, it's going to be bringing a small team together under the title of Operation Phoenix, which will be specifically targeting those phone lines, those social media spaces, those places where we know those young people are getting exploited, where we know the drug dealing happens. It will be moving into other areas, for example, York, North Yorkshire, where we know we do move those risks into those areas with our colleagues up there. I know that Humberside are very welcoming for it as well, because that's another place that we put that work in. So it'll be using covert tactics, it'll be using overt tactics, digital media investigators, analysts, all of that is being funded by this additionality, so it's not taken away from that front line, it's getting the additional funding to put that team together. And not only will we be taking apart those lines, but we expect it'll have a consequent impact on our missing children. So we'd be hoping to reduce the demand on some of our resources and to reduce the number of missing children that we have in West Yorkshire. Again, as I've said, reduce that cuckooing, look at those vulnerable people who are getting exploited through this on a regular basis, and really demonstrate to the communities that lower level sort of dealing which is happening on the streets is something that we're actively tackling and taking apart those criminals.
Thank you, and I know that this was a big focus in Calderdale as well, wasn't it, on cuckooing? So some good outcomes there.
Absolutely, across our Clayhole build areas, that is often another issue in relation to those particular areas, because that's where we see that deprivation, that's where we see the opportunity for those criminal gangs to move in, because there's various other deprivation issues which I know you'll be well aware of in those areas.
I wonder whether we can maybe for the autumn look at how David Oliver and I can come together and what can we do to be helpful in this space and make the most of this money.
Absolutely, Mary, absolutely. I mean, we've got, as you'd expect, along with this is a really clear requirement for us to provide returns to the Home Office to show them that we are using this money effectively and that we are taking apart those gangs. So exactly that, as this team develops and grows, we'll get a better understanding of how we can broaden that.
Great stuff. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, moving on. Drug testing in custody suites is something that I support with a financial contribution to West Yorkshire Police every year. Page 4 of the report describes changes to testing arrangements in Wakefield, which seem to have an impact on the number of tests taking place. Can you clarify whether having different drug treatment providers operating across West Yorkshire means there's a different approach to testing across district custody suites? Because obviously this is public money, we want the best outcomes for public money, and if somewhere is doing it brilliantly with good outcomes, we want to know, is that the provider, is that the decision maker in the custody suite, what's going on?
So it isn't. The custody suites all apply the same rules, they all have the same processes across the whole of West Yorkshire within the custody suites. So what's happened with Wakefield is they provide, so where we send the people who have positive tests has changed. It's been a different company has been brought in through a different, it's not a West Yorkshire procurement process, it's a different procurement process. So NHS England have procured a different provider effectively. So that's happened while that provider comes on board. Currently Wakefield has nowhere to send those people who have tested. So it's had a really poor impact on our ability to test in Wakefield because we've got nowhere to send the people who need to go into the appointments for the drug services. We're obviously continuing to have meetings with Turning Point, who are the new provider. It should be a matter of weeks now until they're up and running and ready to now continue that service. So I suppose from our perspective, nothing has changed for us in terms of how we do the testing, when we do the testing, the decisions that are made, and they are consistent across custody suites. What's changed is the service provider that does the treatment provision, and because that's been, while the procurement's gone through and that service provider has stood up, we've not had anywhere to send effectively the people who need that treatment, but that should be back up and running within a few weeks.
That's reassuring that it's going to be back to full steam. But the challenge is at the bottom of page 3. There's a reference to cuts in Home Office funding from 70,000 to 25,000 regarding drug testing on arrest, and confirms that no additional funding from the Home Office will be available for 25-26. We know that drugs feature really prominently in domestic abuse cases, and with the impending changes to the number of trigger offences automatically allowing drugs testing, which we hope will include domestic assault, can you say more about the impact and how you plan to fund the tests in the future across all 5 districts, bearing in mind my contribution to this activity and my focus on serious crime?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you'll be aware, the initial trigger offences suggest that those serious violence and domestic abuse offences will be included, which is really good news. Actually, it's really good news, but it does have some consequent challenges for us because of no increase in funding, in fact, the reduction. So to give you some context, that would give us 11,000 additional tests that we would say would be used, and each of those tests cost £10. So it'd be requiring that an extra £110,000 in funding just to comply and take it to the level of every one of those are tested. But we do know, as you've said, Mayor, from the surge testing that we did, that there is a really clear link between DA offending and drug use. So what we're planning on doing is we'll take the trigger offences as a framework, and from that framework we'll take those highest risk, highest harm offences that we believe link through an evidence base into that harm network, and it will be those that we will be testing on. So there'll be probably a reduction in other areas perhaps from that framework, but actually where we know that the evidence base exists on domestic abuse, serious violence, we will do that testing, which then hopefully will balance. The intention is that will balance in terms of slightly more tests with a slight increase in cost, but actually a greater impact in terms of those people that are being tested are the right people with the best outcome as they go through to the right service provider.
And do you see a particular drug that is associated with domestic violence? Cocaine.
Cocaine, yeah.
Yeah, so if your partner's using cocaine, stop them. Because that's one of the things you could do to protect yourself. Well, yes, there you go. Don't have them as your partner. Okie doke. Please jump in if there's any questions.
I mean, obviously that was a big one for us because we've been asking about it, and obviously future reports. It'd be really interesting to look at when the legislation changes and increases the number of drug offences. Really interesting to know how that then changes the picture, because we know that if people get identified as substance misusers, then they can get into treatment, and that's the bottom line. We want them to get the help to prevent them going on to offend.
Exactly that. But the key is to make sure that those services are available for people to be referred to. Okie doke, so moving on. The report also questions the educational work being carried out with young people to raise awareness of the dangers of ketamine, but with its use increasing nationally. Is there any specific enforcement work West Yorkshire Police plan to carry out to target ketamine dealers? And we know far too often, don't we, that ketamine is also cut with other drugs and substances. And also the damage can be long-term, can't it, for young people, particularly bladder issues and so on.
Exactly.
So how are you tackling the ketamine dealers?
So exactly as you said, Mayor, it's a concern when drug use goes up. It's a particular concern when drug use is going up amongst young people, which is what we're seeing nationally, but also in West Yorkshire in relation to the use of ketamine. So we are focusing our response on education in relation to schools, getting in there, trying to educate young people around this and the long-term damage that they can do to themselves if they embark on this. It's incredibly addictive and incredibly harmful, both physically and mentally, when people become reliant on it. So we're doing a lot in the schools in relation to that. We continue to target drug dealers, you'd expect. The YH Rocky have recently seized over 100 kilograms of ketamine as part of Operation Chapel. We've seen a lot of fast parcel deliveries where people are ordering it from different parts of the world, and again we've recovered 13 kilograms in Leeds recently in relation to that fast parcel delivery of it. Ultimately, and it's been talked about, and I think we would be very supportive of its classification being changed to a Class A drug. I think it's so harmful and is on such a march in terms of its increased use, as we've said, particularly in young people, that I think we do need that legislative change, and we'd be really supportive of that happening.
I think people think it's not addictive and it's just a party drug, but there's many cases of addiction, aren't there?
Yeah, and
death, yeah.
Yeah, and those, and again, those young people, if you read some of their stories, they will absolutely talk about becoming mentally reliant on it, because if their mental health is suffering, they become reliant on it as they consider it gives them some sort of space from what they're dealing with. And we know when it gets into those sort of spaces where it becomes acceptable within the classroom, then again, it's very, very difficult to then create that influence. So the education piece is incredibly important around it. You've talked about the physical damage that ketamine can do, and once they're on that path, it's very difficult actually for doctors and the health services to deal with those issues.
Yeah, and you never know what's in it.
No, I never.
This is the problem,
with
all drugs. Okay, thank you very much for that. And also thank you for the report's case studies describing the work to tackle drug crime and related antisocial behaviour in communities. And I really welcome the success of Operation Orion in Halifax Town Centre. But can you tell us more about whether tackling drug dealing, shoplifting and homelessness in West Yorkshire will be part of the Safer Streets Town Centre campaign this summer? I know from the public this is really important to them, their experience of their community, their life, their feeling of safety for their kids to go to the shops, to hang out on a Saturday. I really could do with reassurance that this is going to be part of Safer Streets Towns.
It absolutely is. We're fully committed to delivering the government Safer Streets campaign, and obviously we're welcoming that additional prevention and enforcement action in the town centres. We obviously we'll learn what we can pick up from Calderdale. Other areas as well are doing fantastic work in these sort of arenas, but this is really that sort of ramp up, isn't it, as we move into this safer streets area. So in terms of what it'll be doing, it'll be dealing with the big demand generators, street crime, robbery, retail crime, the shoplifting, as you've mentioned, business robbery, burglary robbery, and also crucially that antisocial behaviour related crime. It's defined it in a long list I won't go through here, but I'm happy to if you wanted to, Mayor. It doesn't include homelessness, but it absolutely does include that harassment, the possession of cannabis, because we know that smell is really impactful for communities who want to go out with their young people in town and city centres. So it really does focus on that as a driver of antisocial behaviour, the possession, the criminal damage, public fear, alarm or distress, so that harassment, so people can feel far more confident. So yeah, districts will be monitored in relation to that and volume of arrest. I'm sure we'll be bringing that back here. We're obviously providing that back as well to the government in terms of positive outcomes, plus probably most crucially what community engagement we did in those spaces to give that reassurance and to make people feel safer when they're visiting the towns and cities in West Yorkshire. So yeah, fully committed to that. We think it's a fantastic initiative and the MPTs will be driving into it as we move throughout the summer.
Thank you. And I know that aggressive begging and visible drug dealing in town centres is incredibly upsetting for the public. So I'm pleased that that's part of the list, isn't it?
Yeah. That's exactly what it is.
Yes, please, Alison.
Yeah, I just wanted to pay tribute to Chief Inspector May Preston, who I've been out with a couple of times now, and she's doing some brilliant stuff in Calderdale, which I think others in other bits of West Yorkshire could learn from. But what was important was the community engagement, which I have to say was not so great in the beginning. I went to Happy Days and I met some of the people impacted by the partial house closures, for example. But she really engaged when I shared those feelings with her. She went to see Happy Days and their service users, absolutely then ramped up the engagement alongside the enforcement, and together we've now got some really brilliant outcomes. And that partnership with Happy Days, I think, is a brilliant exemplar for other areas of West Yorkshire, because they're working hand in hand now to achieve the objectives, because many of the people housed by that charity are victims as well as, you know, sometimes being perpetrators. And Chief Inspector Preston really understood the coterminosity between victim and perpetrator, and has done that work really compassionately.
Yeah, and I think it's neighbourhood policing at its very core, isn't it? It's exactly what we want when we want that investment in neighbourhood policing and that engagement out there with people who can bolster on to the efforts that we're making. And in fact, as we said with the Clearhall Bill, which I know Deputy Mayor you're really involved in, they take it over then, don't they? Fill the space with positive work instead of it all being about the policing response.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, good stuff. You don't want your community just full of high vis. You want your community full of kids playing out and people feeling safe. Okay, thank you. Okie doke. Just finally, we know that drug dealing close to residential areas has a massive impact on local residents and their sense of safety. And certainly when I'm out and about, this is one thing that people do raise with me. What advice can you offer residents who want to report their concerns but may be too scared to do so because of the fear of retribution?
Yeah, I suppose I'd reiterate what you said around the hate crime, and it is really important that people feel confident to report stuff, but we do understand that that doesn't always mean they feel confident to provide their name. Crime Stoppers is a phenomenal charity. It does fantastic work in taking those anonymised reports from people within the community, and that does come through to us as we don't ever get the names of those individuals, but we do get to start to understand what's going on in the community, so we can layer up that picture and respond accordingly, exactly as you said yourself, Mayor. So that's fantastic. You can also come anonymously through 101, and that includes online, so again you don't have to give your name, and it's not like we're going to come and trace you or try to find you. You can do that online as well, whichever is the best, most effective way for you. We're having community meetings out in the community. Again, you can approach your local officers, your local PCSOs to talk to them, and again that can be done completely anonymously, and you might find yourself in a space with other people who are reporting the same issue, so that might help to give you a little bit of confidence to understand that you're not alone in terms of what you're suffering from. And again, all of that just helps to build up pictures, or ask a friend to do it for you if you're really struggling with that. But I think particularly for those people who are able to get online, that probably feels a little bit of a safer space for people. But if you can't, again, pick the phone up, and Crime Stoppers, if you want to put somebody in between the police and yourself, is a brilliant way to do it.
And just to reassure the public that if they do report online, no one will be tracing them.
No.
Great.
No,
So it's just
not unless there's a significant threat to life issue. So
Oh,
obviously,
yes,
if we need
yeah.
to follow up with somebody, we might call you back if it was a significant threat to life issue, because we have responsibilities, but not where you're simply trying to report something that's going on in your community.
Lovely, thank you. Thank you so much, ACC Sarah Jones. Temporary ACC,
Temporary,
yes. But thank you very much for that. Always very interesting. So moving on to item 7, strategic policing requirements. I know that the Deputy Chief Constable, Catherine Hankinson, is responding to these. So my first question, with regard to the 800 live investigations, how many of these have an impact in West Yorkshire, and what are the risk levels attached to these investigations, and how effective is the prevent and nominal management work locally? Maybe you can just go through prevent, what it means, and the nominal as well.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, just for the public.
Yeah, so in regards to the first part of the question, understandably I'll have to keep this fairly high level, but around 8% of those 800 are managed within the north-northeast kind of Seven Force area. And as you might imagine, with West Yorkshire being quite a big area within that, a number of that 8% are being managed within West Yorkshire. But yeah, moving on to the second bit of your question then. So prevent has 2 or 3 objectives really. So the first of those objectives would be to tackle the ideological drivers of terrorism, so those underpinning beliefs as to what drives people to want to commit terrorist offences. The second would be to intervene as early as possible, and that's a really key part of prevent, is intervening early as possible to safeguard individuals, often vulnerable individuals, being drawn into or supporting terrorism. And then finally, and this is where the nominal management comes in, to support the rehabilitation and resettlement of those that have been involved in terrorism, often when they come out of the other side of that, and how we manage them as a nominal moving forward to make sure that they don't engage in that kind of behaviour again. So those first 2 objectives are managed with a number of different performance metrics. And the first one is very much about numbers, but they are connected. So the referral rates is about the number of referrals from our local authority partners and other statutory partners across West Yorkshire that we get into our prevent arena. Probably the better understanding really is what we do from those referral rates is then we have an understanding of, you can better manage or monitor the quality of those referral rates by how many of those are converted into cases that then end up being managed in that prevent arena. So, we might have many referrals through, but ultimately, we want to understand the number of those that are converted into actual cases, where we can then put some really bespoke interventions in place in terms of those individuals. The outcome rates are obviously judged at case closure. So once, if a threat is identified and somebody is in the prevent arena, we might then look at what they have been involved in and what we might have then mitigated. And then we can judge the success in terms of what we might have prevented. And you do hear about that, don't you, being reported quite often, that X number of plots have been foiled across a certain number of years in, parts of the UK, etc. So all of those different metrics are managed by the West Yorkshire Tactical Delivery Group, which is led by our Force Prevent Strategic Lead, who sits at headquarters. And all of the district commanders and the local authorities and other statutory partners are all involved in and feed into that process. What I can say is that our referral, conversion and positive outcome rates in West Yorkshire are amongst the best in the country. So
that is very reassuring.
It is,
and obviously today is the tragic anniversary of the Southport murders, and obviously the public will be could potentially be startled by these numbers of 800 live investigations involving thousands of subjects of interest who are suspected of being directly involved in terrorism. And so your those numbers don't reflect the seriousness, is what you're saying.
They don't
They're
necessarily
triaged.
reflect the seriousness. They're obviously, they'll be risk assessed at different levels. I suppose what I would say is that we've got a really good. They're obviously ongoing live investigations across the country. What we have got is, I'm confident that we've got a good referral mechanism into Prevent via the contest board, which is actively supported by our local authority partners and other statutory agencies, education and so on, which then give us the best opportunity to intervene early, which is absolutely what we want to do, isn't it? Before anything becomes a live investigation, we want to intervene with young people and older people, but especially our young people, to understand what their motivations are and often what vulnerabilities are leading them to be susceptible to that kind of radicalisation.
I think there's something for me as well that came out of the crossbow incident in Leeds, where obviously that is not a terrorism ideology, that there is also a risk through misogyny in society that also radicalises people. So it's an interesting debate, I think, that will continue to be discussed, and something that we are discussing, isn't it?
Yeah.
About how we can work with the police to support communities to get better outcomes from these programmes.
Yeah. And then I think in terms of the very last part of the question, which was about nominal management, that's often the other side of things. So when people have perhaps had a custodial sentence, come out of the other side of that, and then they are being managed often through the multi-agency public protection arrangements, the MAPA process. So that's with policing, but also really importantly probation and prisons, where we have that very collective, in-depth overview of very few individuals, because it doesn't apply to very many people, but that we have a very clear view of whether there is any continuing risk, and if there is, how that risk is being managed, and that is managed really very tightly.
Great, thanks. Anything to add, Alison?
No.
Lovely. Thank you so much for that. Okie doke, moving on. Can you provide an update on the digital and data strategy 22-25? Is the strategy being refreshed? Can you say more about the areas being looked at in West Yorkshire to ensure that the county is best prepared for a cyber-related attack? We know that large organisations have been attacked recently, really impacting on their business, Marks and Spencer's being one. But could you talk us through the digital and data strategy?
Yeah. So in terms of, the answer is yes to the first one, which is it being refreshed? It is, and our refresh strategy will be done by sort of the early autumn time, late August, September time. So we have an ongoing strategy. It's not something that gets put on a shelf. It's an ongoing thing that, as and when new either innovations or directives come out from the national, sort of the central bodies in terms of this area, we will progress and update and move things as we should do. And clearly there's a lots of work in the background to make sure that we are as secure as we can be in terms of cyber security as an organisation. But yes, in answer to the first part of the question, it is being refreshed, and it will be the 2025-28 strategy will be done by the early part of the autumn. So lots actually ongoing in terms of what we do as an organisation to help other people external to our organisation prepare for cyber attacks. So no surprise, as you say, to anybody, given all the very recent and very public M&S co-op and so on that we've had on the radio and the news, etc. So really significant threat to individuals and businesses within the UK. Cabinet Office estimates the cost of cybercrime to the UK to be £44 billion in lost revenue. So really, significant in terms of that type of criminality that often goes almost hidden, because I suppose in many respects it's not very overt. There's not an obvious threat of violence. Nobody's impacted physically, but the often I suppose the mental impact for individuals in feeling vulnerable, but also the financial impact to businesses is absolutely huge. So often the most significant way in which this is done is ransomware, which obviously presents a really significant issue in terms of either loss of service or loss of data, things not being able to be put on shelves, orders not being able to be made, all that kind of thing that we've seen recently. But clearly, depending on what organisation it is, it's one thing not being able to order, a jumper from Marks and Spencer's, quite another if, any infrastructure was impacted, etc., or data was leaked that was sensitive and significant. So different levels of cyber security obviously attached to different organisations around the country, not just in West Yorkshire. Often I think what we do find, and I suppose the message is for members of the public who might be watching, is that often I think either for maybe people are embarrassed if it's an individual issue, or for commercial reputational reasons, these things might not necessarily be reported to the police, and they might be dealt with, by the individuals or by the companies. It's important to report them, I would say, through the avenues to let us know, as you say. Sometimes not because there might be these things are very difficult to follow through, but at least then we understand where the trends are and we can build a picture. So at the moment, the Regional Organised Crime Unit within West Yorkshire have got ownership of our response to that ransomware threat, if you like. I think the easiest way probably really to think about the ways in which we approach the threat posed from cybercrime would be what we often refer to in the police, the 4 Ps. So protect, prevent, I always get these the wrong way around, prepare and pursue. So we just take the pursue bit is the bit that we do as the policing, isn't it, to look at, to do the investigations and to arrest people. But there's an awful lot that statutory agencies and members of the public can do to help with the first 3, really. So in terms of the protect, obviously there's lots of advice that people can find on the West Yorkshire Police website, and if you just type in a Google search about how to protect yourself, there's loads of being cyber aware, cyber security advice that you can find for individuals or small, large businesses. Often large businesses have got people who look after cyber security on their behalf, so probably less vulnerable, but certainly smaller businesses and individuals can look at that. We also have quite a lot of sort of social media campaigns, online events and community events throughout the year that are advertised, where people can attend and understand a little bit more around cyber security. In terms of prepare, as you would expect, as an organisation, we make sure that we test our operational response, organisational response to cyber threat, and that involves not just our own organisation, but other emergency services and tier 2 organisations as well, as you'd expect. But we also draw local businesses into that as well. And we do have a subgroup under our local resilience forum. One of the key threats that's been identified for the last few years now, actually, I think, in West Yorkshire is cyber, the threat from cyber. And therefore there's a subgroup that's set up specifically to look at that within West Yorkshire, which has got lots of different partners involved. And we will test on a reasonably regular basis, pulling together people to run through scenarios and work out what would we do in this situation. And the difficulty, I think, with this kind of crime type is that it's evolving so quickly.
Yeah.
It's not as straightforward as, whilst we wouldn't ever want to be subject to a burglary, we kind of all can understand what a burglary is. There's not that many ways of going about doing a burglary, whereas there's lots and lots of different ways that people can infiltrate, get your data. Certain people are moving on that really quite quickly all the time, and we're having to be really agile to keep on top of that and keep caught up with that kind of information. So yeah, I'd focus people's attention towards that cyber awareness. And like I say, it's not just the West Yorkshire Police website, but there's lots of different websites where you can really make yourself as secure as you can do, and your families and children as secure as you can do against cyber attack.
I think it's something I'll take away as well with our business board and put that on the agenda, and just be able to share best practice with our businesses and signatories to the Fair Work Charter as well, because the majority of businesses in West Yorkshire are SMEs, and they don't have the huge tech teams behind them that the Co-op and M&S have,
Yeah.
and it could destroy your business,
Yeah.
couldn't it?
And we've got the consortium of small businesses that sit on, as an aside, but who sit on the appointed, because Damien was sat here, the Business Crime Forum that Damien Miller chairs. And certainly I know probably 18 months ago now we had a really quite fulsome input to that group from our cyber security and cybercrime team to give them as much advice as we could do, but we could look to repeat that again because again,
and like you say,
people,
18 months ago things have moved on again.
There'll be new people, so I'll mention that to Damien.
Thank you, that's grand.
Yeah.
Cheers, thank you very much. Okay, so moving on. So how do West Yorkshire Police balance the response to dealing with serious public disorder? Obviously, this is also in the news at the moment, alongside the need for community cohesion. And we've got a few supplementary questions on this item as well.
Yeah.
But just in the first instance, it's a really difficult balance, isn't it? We saw great evidence of partnership working and community cohesion in Hare Hills. But how do we keep that balance going forward?
Yeah, so I think before we even address the issue of the disorder, almost like the prevent bit of this and the bit about developing relationships with communities in peacetime is about neighbourhood policing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's about knowing who to go to at times like that, where after we've dealt with that very initial flashpoint of whatever the disorder is, we've got the right people with the right contacts to come in swiftly and be able to help us return things to normality as quickly as possible, essentially. So, but in essence, I mean, we, as a police force, part of the strategic policing requirement is about making sure that as, not just as West Yorkshire Police, but as police in UK, we have enough resource and enough trained people to be able to respond if we have seats of or multiple seats of disorder across the country. So we've got a responsibility to be able to do that, and we monitor that really regularly, and we're always in a good position in terms of that. So, you know, I suppose in the initial, when the initial disorder happens, we have a very clear command and control structure, gold, silver, bronze. Everybody knows exactly what their roles and responsibilities are. And then we have trained officers who, if we need them to implement particular public order tactics, can do so safely with a view to obviously safety for the officers, but also safety for as many of the members of the public that are there as possible. And then it is, you know, we have community impact assessments, which I'm sure you've heard of before, where essentially we will do one of those as soon as an incident breaks to understand, it's almost like taking the temperature really of an area at that particular point in time and understanding, as it says on the tin I suppose, what the community impact is at that particular time and what steps need to be put in place to mitigate whatever's happening to bring things back to that sense of normality. And often the best people to do that are the neighbourhood inspectors and staff because they know that community best. They're not always on duty when something breaks in the middle of the night, but as soon as they can be, and quite often they self-deploy in situations like this because, as you know, a lot of our staff, you know, really are very passionate and very linked into the communities that they police. So as soon as they understand something's happening in their particular area, they'll be the first to want to deploy, come in and try and help in terms of resolving it. So that community impact assessment is done, and that will continue to be refreshed and monitored until we're confident that that return to normality has happened. And then there's obviously lots of work post-incident to, you know, think about learning, think about building any bridges that need to be built, etc., etc. So in many respects, the flashpoint or the part of the disorder that's, you know, is a very small part of it. It's the work that's done prior to that with the neighbourhood officers, and then obviously as important the work that's done straight afterwards as well.
I think it's also about the work that's been done in trust and confidence of the police, which it comes from neighbourhood policing, and that some communities have a fear of police, and that they don't feel that the police are the people to solve the problem, but are the problem. So this is a challenge for us as well, isn't it, as a region, to ensure that the public understand obviously everybody understands when you're in trouble you ring 999, but also that the police are there as community members as well to make better communities.
Yeah, and there's always a judgment call to be made about we are clearly there to keep people safe and property safe, but if we are the only people almost causing the issue, it might be the right time to withdraw at that point. But they're difficult judgment calls that have to be made on the day or night, aren't they?
Indeed. Anything to add? When we learn the supplementary ones.
Yeah, but just to say, obviously, the events in Hare Hills brought that to life, didn't they? Because where we had that really good engagement with the communities through the clear hole build work that had been done in Hare Hills 18 months before, those relationships really came to the fore because the police knew the communities knew the police, and so those conversations were able to take place in a really respectful way, which meant that when the community said, please leave, you're the problem, the police didn't take that personally and think, well, we've got to stay. They heard those communities, and of course they had oversight of the scene all the time through the drones, the helicopters, and being a few streets away. But that trust that the police placed in the community, I think, has helped the community trust policing more.
Yeah.
It's interesting, there's a documentary from Orgreave, and there's a clip of a community organiser speaking to the police saying, you are the focus, if you withdraw things will calm down, and there was a different decision taken, and we know what happened, the tragedy of that civil unrest or that
and I think
disorder.
we understand more now, don't we, about you know, the community relations, neighbourhood policing has developed, hasn't it, over a number of years, and I think our temptation often is we are here, and you know, the public ring us, don't they, to solve the problem in the immediacy of a situation, but there's always a position to take in terms of when's the right time to take ourselves out of that situation, because we're arguably making it worse than better.
Super, thank you. So just to dig a little deeper into that, has the force maintained the necessary public order capabilities to respond to public order as set out in the SPR?
Yes. So we manage and monitor that regularly at both the operational support accountability meeting and also at the force, I'm terrible when it's acronyms and I'm trying to remember what the words stand for, force and public order command meeting that one of our ACC's operational support chairs. So we make sure as part of that meeting that number one, we've got the right number of gold, silver, bronze commanders, but also operational officers and tactical advisors, but that we're also trying as best we can to plan a succession plan, because these things take a while in terms of getting people through courses, training people up, so that we can make sure that we maintain that number on the cadre and that we're not overworking people that are in that position where they are responding, especially when you can have sometimes a few days at a time, can't you, or a few weeks of disorder where people are having rest days cancelled, etc. So yeah, we keep on top of that.
And is it helpful to add that West Yorkshire Police are part of the national training capability?
Yeah.
Because we've got the public order training facility at Cargate.
At Cargate, yeah.
So not only do we train our own officers, we're training officers up and down the country, and I suspect even from Scotland.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
But also that request that came, certainly it was last summer, wasn't it, when the request came for West Yorkshire Police to go all over the country and to support other forces, and it's incredibly stressful and hard for officers who've, like you say, rest days cancelled, weekends cancelled.
And that's the thing, I think often, and through no fault of anybody's, it's reported, isn't it, in the media and on the news, extra officers have been drafted in. There are no extra officers. They are officers who have had rest days cancelled and are not seeing family and friends at weekend or days off, and they'll be back on duty for their normal shifts. They're not extra officers. They're officers working extra shifts, actually. I appreciate that's not meant to be depicted in that way, but that you're absolutely right. It really does take a toll on people over a length of time.
Just to build on that, if the force was requested to send additional resources to other areas in response to disorder, would you be able to provide support?
Yes, we would. We would always take a balanced view on making sure that we had enough resource within West Yorkshire based on the information and intelligence that we were aware of, so that we we're able to respond and protect the communities of West Yorkshire should we need to.
Yeah.
But then there will always be extra capacity, whether that's people that should be on duty or whether it's people that have to be drawn in who are on rest days to be able to fulfil our part to the national effort. Just as we'd expect people to do it if we needed them in West Yorkshire.
And certainly the Queen's funeral, the King's coronation, we provided supplementary officers during those big events. It's not always disorder, is it?
No, it's not. It's not always disorder. No, there's quite
well.
often, big events around the country that we need to support UK policing on,
Lovely, thank you. And finally on this section, how does the forces, public order, public safety, planning and mobilisation consider and prioritise the well-being of officers and staff, including access to food, drink, toilet facilities, personal protective equipment? Obviously they're being deployed. What's the strategy when it comes to looking after officers on the job?
Yeah, so all of our officers who are deployed in a public order capacity, so level 2 if you like, will have their own kit with their own individual kit that they're responsible for keeping safe and maintaining, but it is specific to them, so they don't have to scrabble around for equipment should they need to deploy. They've got their own equipment. Depending on where they go and how organised it is, so if it's an organised event, so like the King's coronation for example, then there's time to plan for that, and therefore the officers that are deployed down to London will have somewhere to sleep and will have their meals provided on the days that they're on duty. If it's a more spontaneous Hare Hills type issue, clearly for the first few hours there won't be that kind of provision put in place, but we do have welfare vans, so teas, coffees, that kind of thing. The Federation obviously have their thin brew line van that they can bring out should we need to, but we can move that is a movable resource, the support van, around the force. So if we use it for things like if we have extended scenes, crime scenes, where we've got people standing out on scenes for long extended periods of time, we'll have places where, so there's loos within there, and there's a place where you can make a brew and get a warm drink, maybe warm something up in a microwave. So we've got facilities for whether it's planned or quite quickly, even if it's unplanned, we can get things in place within a few hours.
That's good to know, because obviously the well-being of officers is really important when we're asking them to go the extra mile, and they could be tired and out of their own community and not know where they are or where their facilities are.
And then of course you've got the follow-up, you've got your trauma trackers, you've got your individual conversations about the experiences officers have had, just so the public know it's not just about their immediate needs, it's the long-term impact of being on site of a murder or whatever it is. That's definitely something that's that they're encouraged to talk about, and there's provision that can support them in the longer term.
Yeah, and we often get some good feedback, especially when we go on deployments into the Met, about how friendly and approachable our contingents of officers have been. I think probably because we perhaps engage and the northern way.
We're from Yorkshire.
It's the northern way, but yeah, we do get good feedback about the engagement of our officers when they're deployed elsewhere.
We'll be cheered up when we'll go down south and think about coming back home.
Okie doke. Moving on to item 8. Thank you. Supporting victims and witnesses, and I think yourself, ACC Jones, are going to be responding. So, question 1. I see people on the verge of offending being offered restorative and supportive pathways through the use of out-of-court resolutions. It's a really positive way of diverting them away from offending, while satisfying the victim's needs for the case to be resolved positively. What does West Yorkshire Police need from partners to allow out-of-court resolutions to work even better for victims to reduce reoffending?
Yeah, so obviously it's got to be meaningful for the victim, as you've already said. The victim needs to feel a level of satisfaction in terms of some recourse to justice, and that's incredibly important. But obviously what an out-of-court resolution does is it puts a perpetrator into a place where perhaps they can learn, develop, and take some of that weight away from other areas of the justice system, which we've seen highlighted recently, the significant need to do that. We're always looking for opportunities to increase the number of the pathways. We get some great support from the police and crime team, who put us in touch with the local authority, with health, the third sector, so that we can set those up. And amongst others, that's included pathways for dedicated to female offenders and for those for whom drug use is a particular issue in terms of committing crime. I think the challenge for us is that those pathways need to have some longevity. Clearly we need to train our staff in terms of what we've got available to us. We need consistency, and crucially we need that equity across the whole of West Yorkshire. So I think that sometimes can be a challenge, but of course what we always want to avoid is that postcode lottery where something's available for a victim or a perpetrator in Calderdale, for example, that isn't available for that same victim or perpetrator in Leeds. We might pilot something in one area, but we really need that ability to be able to have that consistency from across the piece. So we're always looking where there are gaps. We'd always want people to get in touch. We'll continue to work with Simon and the police and crime team. We are in the process of commissioning an online platform that's going to give us a single integrated booking system, so that will allow much better access for officers and also for those perpetrators. And again, it gives us some real consistency around what we've got available and where, and hopefully it makes the process much smoother, where we've got that online intervention and those ones that are tailored for various different crime types. So I suppose the answer to that, Mary, is we're always wanting people to come and work with us in this arena, but there are some things that we need as an organisation to be able to make sure that it's meaningful for the victim and it is going to work for the perpetrators.
I mean, we have seen some incredible outcomes, haven't we? People who've gone through the worst crisis in their life and then finding some hope at the end, having met the perpetrator, and that restorative justice, it does work. But we have to make sure that it's available to everybody.
Exactly, yeah.
And certainly the way that it's been commissioned is also really good, isn't it?
Yeah, and we've also got CARA that you're funding, even though it's a difficult balancing act because we don't get funding from government. We're looking to introduce Drive, which the government wants to fund, which is for higher risk perpetrators. But we are undertaking a bit of an audit of all our local authority partners to see what opportunities we can explore for extending out of court pathways, and what activity are they commissioning or do they have in their localities that you could then piggyback onto, so that we have got more opportunities for those pathways. But that's a piece of work that we're doing, and we'll obviously come back to you when we've completed that. And I know Simon's constantly talking to Simon from our office is constantly talking to you about this area of work, because we are passionate about reducing reoffending, and sending people to prison works for some people, it doesn't work for all people, and it doesn't prevent that harm from happening, and that's what we want.
No, and you're absolutely right, Deputy Mayor. And ultimately, when people are going to prison, they're coming out earlier. So, you know, where again we can release some of that weight for the right people, exactly as you say, who it's going to work for, and crucially where the victim still feels like they've received justice, and actually it's a real positive result for them. It's got to be something that we embrace.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, moving on. It's welcome to see the Victims Code of Practice compliance by officers and staff making regular contact with victims and updating them at significant points in the investigation is high, with only 7.9% of cases non-compliant. However, the Victim Satisfaction Survey shows that 67.1% of victims are satisfied with this measure, which shows a significant difference between the forced compliance and victim perception. Have West Yorkshire Police done any work to understand that difference?
Yeah, so I think it's a couple of different things. So in relation to the Victims Code of Practice, that's very much about how we maintain contact with the victim, determined often by what they want, but we have those conversations, and then we're required to provide those updates that are meaningful updates at regular occurrences. So that's where we've got some really good performance in terms of maintaining that contact with victims. And we know we've regularly had feedback in the past about victims really struggling to get updates on their investigations, not getting told what's going on. So that is a critical part that we know really informs victim satisfaction. but it's not exactly the same as, because one, not every victim's surveyed as part of the victim satisfaction service. It's not like a one-on-one. Not everybody gets it. They obviously take a sample size, and also they might have been unhappy with something else. So it might not have been the victim contact they were unhappy. They might have been really happy with that, but they might not have been happy with the outcome in relation to what happened with their investigation, and that can obviously inform their view of what happened overall as that whole journey. So we do have a bi-monthly victim satisfaction meeting that all the districts and specialist leads go to, and that looks at us addressing the satisfaction trends and the contact data. So it takes both of those things in, but crucially it also does service recovery. So where we find that perhaps we've got a victim who's unhappy, we will then seek to address that, get some feedback, pull that into that meeting, and then build trends around what we can do differently in terms of providing a better service. Sometimes, you know, it's out of our hands. It just might not be the outcome that you wanted as a victim. And as long as we've communicated that properly, provided you with the right support in terms of those victim services, we just have to accept that as an organisation. But where we can learn and layer it up into that learning, and where it changes what we do, then that's what we do by that meeting.
And certainly the release of the perpetrator is something that victims will always say, I needed to know.
Absolutely, of course, yeah, because of that risk to them. And I think we are, that again goes to better victim updates, making sure we're clear on what we're going to tell you and when we're going to tell you it, and sticking to that timetable.
Super, thank you. Okie doke, can you say more about the measures explained in the report to ensure that victims of domestic abuse and sexual offences, they feel able to report what's happened to them in a way that meets their needs?
Yeah, so, you know, as everybody here and watching will understand, it's an incredibly difficult thing for a victim survivor to come forward to report something, whether it be either domestic abuse or sexual offences. It's an incredibly personal journey for them. So we've done an awful lot of training with that initial contact, so our customer contact centre and on our help desk. They get very bespoke training around domestic abuse matters and the domestic homicide timeline, and they are trained to provide that empathetic, trauma-informed response at that first point of contact. So we've done an awful lot around that to try and facilitate people through that very difficult, probably not first disclosure, but first disclosure probably into authority. We then do an awful lot of work around our audit of that, so that we go through and we have a strict audit within our contact centre where they're looking at vulnerability to the VOG areas, and we have some specially trained sergeants who are absolutely rigorous around that. So they are constantly looking at identifying whether those staff have properly identified risk, whether they've properly supported those victims and those survivors as they come forward. We're also piloting some technology, again AI technology, that again looks at risk and makes sure it is exactly what Damien just said. It doesn't take away from that individual officer response, but it might add some additional context that we don't see as human beings, that might tell us that there's an additional risk with that particular person that you might not pick up as an individual. We've made changes. Victims can state gender preference now, and that came as a result of feedback from a victim engagement strategy when women taking part in a focus group said it was really important, particularly for women, to be able to get a woman to come and to take that initial disclosure. So we've made that change so that you can say if you want a woman to come and take that, because we can see that barrier potentially for some women might be really challenging, or for some men might be really challenging if they're having to do that. So we've made those changes as well, and obviously we've also brought in where there's different ways to report as well. So actually, if you want to get it over really quickly, you can get a specially trained officer over a video link now, because if you want to make that disclosure quickly, or in a space that you are safe at that point and you want to be able to do it immediately and not wait for an officer to attend, we can facilitate that over a video link. And of course, we've always got our online reporting available again, because I think some people feel it's slightly less personal if you can do it online and you're able to sort of articulate maybe a little bit easier than you're having to actually speak to somebody around getting over some of that. And of course, you'll know, Mayor, that our victim satisfaction for domestic abuse victims is an impressive 86.6%, with increases of 4.4% over the past 12 months. So we think all of that work that we're doing is really playing out into some better satisfaction, particularly for those domestic abuse victims.
Yeah, keep going. It's really good numbers, that 86+%. Yeah, so thank you for all that you do. Thank you. Okie doke. So moving on to effectiveness and efficiency in the criminal justice system. I'd just like to record our thanks to ACC Pat Twiggs, who's now retired, for his efforts in bringing about significant improvements in the investigation of crime, in particular domestic abuse. Operation Reset and now Operation Rapid are reducing our repeat victimisation rate down to levels not seen since 2016, and the trajectory is continuing to go down. And repeat victimisation for domestic abuse at 41.4% in 24-25 from 48.8% in 22-23. I'd also like to recognise the work ACC Twigs and colleagues have done working with partners in the Crown Prosecution Service through the local Criminal Justice Board to improve outcomes for victims by charging at the earliest opportunity and seeking remands in custody where appropriate to keep victims safe. I know that was a challenge that was difficult to tackle, so really pleased to see that. I also want to highlight the project to improve the awareness of special measures for victims attending court, the training of officers, the animated information films for victims, and the numbers of special measure cases granted in 24-25. It's an amazing piece of work and will improve the confidence of victims to come forward and seek the justice they deserve. I note that 370 applications were made and 280 were granted at court. So that is a really good news story, that if you feel anxious about reporting, you have those special measures that will enable you to be protected as you go through the process of the Crown Prosecution Service. So it's good stuff, isn't it, Alison?
Absolutely. And as chair of the local Criminal Justice Board, I felt it was really important that we acknowledge the work of ACC Pat Twigs and West Yorkshire Police, of course, because we didn't start 4 years ago in the best place, and our relationship with the Crown Prosecution Service wasn't what it is today. And I think working with all our local Criminal Justice Board partners, we've little by little really begun to properly represent victim voices in a way that we weren't before. And I think I wanted this paper to come because the public don't always understand the whole pathway for a victim or indeed a perpetrator, the partners that it involves. It's not just about policing, it's about all the partners, including the courts system, witness support, witness care. All of those partners together bring a perpetrator to justice or not. And if you don't get that engagement with the victim, then victim attrition is very high, and it means that potentially perpetrators can go on to reoffend. So I think it's really important. Didn't have lots of questions, I just wanted to really amplify that work that ACC Pat Twigs had started. No pressure, Sarah, and I hope that it continues, because it's really making huge differences here, and victims are working with us now in a way that they weren't working with us before. And I think that satisfaction rate for DA survivors is absolutely because of the work not just of wider West Yorkshire Police but Pat Twigs in particular.
Yes, I hope that he's having a lovely retirement somewhere with his feet up. But
hope he's watching. Hope he's watching.
I hope he's watching.
Well, I hope so. Hi, Pat. But it's individual officers with that determination to make a difference that do drive those good outcomes. And I think particularly around charging, I could never understand that if someone punched me, they could be charged. But if it's an intimate relationship and they punch me, they can't be charged immediately. It doesn't make sense for safety and outcomes. So it's good that we're pressing to do it differently, and also the use of AI in the criminal justice submissions, I think, has given us greater productivity and a greater use of police officers' time as well.
Yeah. And the special measures work is, it's second to none. And as you remember, I was the Victims Commissioner when the Home Secretary, before she became Home Secretary, did a piece of work around improving outcomes for victims. And I met a lot of victims and reported all that back in. And that support throughout that process was the number one key to success as far as victims and survivors were concerned. So all the work around special measures, so that's about giving victims support to go through the system, whether that's the IDVAs that you pay for, or whether that's having a screen in the court, whether that's having the ability to pre-record evidence. All those things are really critical to victims having trust and confidence and going through the system and not dropping out at an early juncture. And actually the special measures stuff we've done, I think other forces are now looking to us to see the work that we've been doing, because it is amazing.
We want those outcomes, those good outcomes. We want people to pay the price for what they've done.
Absolutely.
And I think this is a good way to protect and support the victim, and also to enable them to move on with their lives, because then if it's recorded, then you can look to a brighter future, can't you, without having to keep repeating it all the time as well.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So item 10 is our future agenda items, and the theme is say the outcomes are. Okie doke. Any other business?
Not from
No, thank you. Well, thank you all for watching and for taking time to understand a little bit about the role of the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor in holding West Yorkshire Police to account. As always, please do take part in our serious violence strategy consultation. We need to know your thoughts about what we need to do to tackle serious violence here in West Yorkshire. So thank you so much. And so thank you. If we could end the live stream, thank you.